So welcome, first of all. Some old faces, some new faces, so welcome to everybody. Today is the European session in English, because we've just had one in French. This is the English version, focusing on international fundraising for organisations with a global audience. For those that don't know, the Roundtables began with our first international fundraising across borders, our Ifab event in November 2020, and it grew out of Chapel in York's 25-year history of working with organisations and not-for-profits who fundraise across the globe. We're planning to host another Ifab in November later this year, so please keep an eye out for more information because it's coming your way. So at the Ifab 2020, we gathered huge amounts of knowledge and resources, and we wanted to continue the discussion that we started around what was being presented, and so this was created. So today, we're really delighted to be joined by Laura Hazel and Juan Hendrioan Putra, who I always say wrong, and hopefully by Charlotte Fletcher as well. So to give a quick intro about Laura, Laura's been working fundraising for 15 years in the UK and New Zealand, and she's worked with organisations like Oxfam, Greenpeace, and is currently at Save the Children. She specialises in individual giving and currently leads a senior team of international specialists driving global growth and best practices. Laura is passionate about people and looking at how we work together to achieve results. Outside of fundraising, she also runs her own coaching practice to work with clients and reach their goals. Meanwhile, Juan has been working at WWF International Global Fundraising Team for 11 years. His position is a global fundraising specialist, working with various WWF offices all over the world. And his aim is to grow their individual fundraising income, focusing on face-to-face, telemarketing, and digital for small sum giving. He's passionate about legacy fundraising and spearhead the knowledge management for the fundraising network in WWF. We're hopefully going to be joined by Charlotte Fletcher, who has been working on major gifts and foundation fundraising for over 15 years in UK, Europe, US, and Asia. She's worked across a diverse range of not-for-profits, securing individual major donor gifts and grant funding for organisations of all types and sizes, from local hospice care services to national charities in the UK, such as AGK and the RNIB. Charlotte is now at international NGO Greenpeace, where she leads a global cross-border fundraising programme, Greenpeace USA. So she is based in the UK, but she fundraises from the US. And she works with US major donors and foundations to secure fundraising for Greenpeace around the globe. So I'm sure you'll agree that's a really credible team that we've got on our panel today. So it's really great to have them here to answer your questions and join in the conversation. So each roundtable is hosted by a Chapel in York foundation across the world. Today, I'm your host. My name is Helen Maynard-Hill, and I represent the Netherlands Foundation. I'm British, but I've been living in the Netherlands for about 13 years, and I've fundraised in the UK and Europe, as well as helping organisations all over the world. Although I'm the host, I would really like you and the speakers to be doing most of the talking. I've asked them each to do a quick chat to introduce themselves, but I'd really like to encourage you to ask questions either via the chat box, or please raise your virtual hand. And I'd ask, if you are talking, please switch your video on so we can see who you are. And it's a lot easier to interact with the face. Also, we will be recording the session, as some people who haven't been able to make it today have asked to be sent the recording so they don't miss out. So Chatham House rules apply, which means this is a trusted environment to try to understand and resolve complex problems. So kind of what goes on tour stays on tour. So please feel free to ask questions, interact, and let's keep it in-house. So all that said, Laura, are you happy to begin?
I am, yes, thank you for the introductions. Hi, everybody. And maybe just to reiterate, if you are able to put your webcam on, it would be lovely to see you, because as Helen said, this is going to be a discussion and not just Juan and I talking at you, so it would be really nice to see your faces. And I'm sure, although we've got some stuff to share, there's going to be so many similar challenges here, so it will be good to hear from all of you as well. To give you a bit of an overview, really about what's been happening at Save the Children for the past 18 months. It's been such a turbulent time for everybody. I joined the international team in April last year, in the middle of our first lockdown here in the UK. I'm based near Manchester. I still haven't met any of my team in person, So we've, although I'm used to working virtually and have worked remotely from home for a number of years now, because of what's been going on, actually haven't had any chance to meet colleagues face to face, which is very interesting in these times that we work in. For us at Save the Children, last year, was a really big year for us. 2/3 of our individual giving acquisition comes from face-to-face fundraising. And of course, when COVID hit last year, we had to put that on hold in most of the countries that we work in. It was a really hard time, as I'm sure it was for all of you. And I think for us, one of the biggest things that we had to really sort of do, and this word kept coming up, was pivot, and really look at how we took our investments from face to face and put it into other areas as quickly as we were able to. And for us, that really meant focusing on digital, either direct acquisition through social media, ads for regular giving asks, or we did a lot of two steps, so lead generation and conversion through telemarketing in lots of our markets. We also have hugely increased in DRTV, and again, we've had a lot of success through that, but of course we're all in the same boat, and a lot of the INGOs have been doing the same. We launched a global appeal on COVID last year, and that was where we came together with all of our member countries, and it was our most successful appeal that we've ever had. And at the last count, we set a target of $100 million US globally, which we have gone above and beyond now. So that was an amazing result for us. In terms of some of the challenges, because it's all well and easy to sit here and say, yes, we smashed our income targets, we launched a global appeal, we did even manage to come in on target with regular giving despite the challenges with face-to-face, but it's not been easy, and I think I wanted to sort of be quite honest about some of the challenges that we faced as an organisation at Save the Children, because I think it will be the same no matter what the scale we're working on, and it's good to sort of look at those lessons learned. One of the things, although we did pivot in lots of markets and sort of redistribute our money in different channels, we probably paused a bit too much in some areas. It was such a crazy time, and I think we were all quite nervous about what was happening, that we saw in lots of our member countries the sort of let's just watch and see and put some of our activities on hold and not really acting as soon enough as we could. That being said, we did sort of get back in there, but it just meant that there was perhaps some missed opportunities. And I think for us, one of the biggest learnings was really about being agile and flexible with our investment decisions, and making sure that we can take money out of things and put it into other areas, and not be afraid to test whilst we were doing it. Another important lesson learned, and I think I talk about this from an internal perspective, but it really did impact hugely and continues to, as many of our teams still work remotely, is around well-being and balance. I think what we found was, and I'm sure it's the case for everybody, with working from home is incredibly challenging for those with children, people that aren't used to working at home, and having those sort of ways of working to make sure you're taking breaks and not just rolling out of bed and turning the laptop on and working all day long and not having much separation from it. And so for us as a global team, actually supporting our fundraisers worldwide and looking after well-being was incredibly important to help us to drive our global appeal and to continue with the different sort of activities that we were doing. So we held a number of things like drop-in sessions, where quite often we would set them up thinking that we would all join to talk about fundraising, but actually people just wanted to have a bit of space to say, hey, how are you doing? This is really tough, isn't it? What's it mean for you? Yeah, it's the same in Spain as it is in Italy, or and to connect with each other on a human level. And actually we found that translated to our donors as well. This was the first time that we had something that really connected everybody across the globe. And it was so important for us to adapt that into how we communicate with our donors as well. And actually, we had some feedback from donor care teams across the world about how important it was to just talk to supporters about what was going on and how are they doing, and just to be human, which we all know in fundraising theory is really important. But I think last year gave us this opportunity to really sort of apply it in a way that we never have done before, and to really use it in all of our messaging, our one-to-one interactions, and also our sort of our mass marketing approaches as well. In terms of maybe just a couple of other quick things to mention, I can see we've got Leisure on the call, who is a legacy expert, so she'll be able to share more on this, I'm sure, than I will. But there's been a huge increase globally of people writing wills, and lots of requests on that. So really, our legacy fundraising has been even more important than ever, although it's part of, for us at Save the Children, one of our core game changer areas for long-term sustainable growth. Really sort of understanding what's happening with legacy giving over the past 12, 18 months is increasingly important to sort of seize the opportunity to talk to people about leaving gifts in their wills. Looking forward, it continues to be challenging for us. One of the things that's really tricky is content gathering. A lot of our program work is international. So getting footage for DRTV, which is a really useful channel for us, with the changing COVID restrictions on travel and the situations being so different in every country. And in fact, just last week we were due to shoot a film in Kenya for a DRTV ad, and that's all had to be put on hold because the situation there has changed. So it's kind of forcing us to find creative ways to look at gathering content, but it has meant that also we're quite slow with what we had planned, and that's going to be the case going forward. So it's continuing to be a challenge for us. And another challenge going forward, really around this big sort of switch to digital and DRTV, is making sure that we attribute our donations in the right way. And I know from colleagues in the INGO world, it's not easy, and actually what we've seen, although a lot of our markets were increasing DRTV, the return on investment wasn't looking that good, and that's because sort of in the back end we're not capturing and tracking where these donations are coming from in the right way. And looking at how we attribute those gifts and record those successes is something we need to have a big focus on and look at collectively within Save the Children, to really make sure that we're seeing the value of the channels that we're investing in the right way. So that's a bit of an overview with lots of different areas. I'll stop there. I'm sure we can dip into some other bits when we get into the discussion, but I'll let Juan go now.
Yeah, super interesting. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, like you say, let's go to Juan, and then we can go to Charlotte to have a bit of intro, and then we'll open the floor to discussion. We've had some questions come in as well, but lots of super interesting points there. So Juan, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name's Juan. I'm based in Belgium, in Brussels. I work for WWF International, as Helen already mentioned. So I think Laura summed it up quite well, to be honest with you, about what happened the last 18 months or so. My work is basically helping WWF offices around the globe to grow their individual income. So I don't really work with stable countries like the UK or the US, but I work with countries like Colombia, Turkey, Greece, so upcoming markets basically like Thailand. So when COVID hit last year and everybody went into lockdown, I was really nervous, to be honest, because I really didn't know whether my countries will make it through, because we stopped face-to-face, and for all of these countries, face-to-face was the main channel of acquisition, and we need to stop. Digital in some of the countries were not up to speed as well, but in a way, the pandemic help us as well to actually take a breather a little bit and see what can we do, innovation, or even test new things. So for example, in Turkey, we decided to do telemarketing. We switched immediately from face-to-face to telemarketing. We bought the software and the program immediately. It was done within a month, I think. very quickly, and I was already campaigning for this for almost 2 years for the Turkish office to start telemarketing, but COVID hit, and then suddenly within a month we're on the go. And surprisingly, we closed our financial year in June, and 4 countries that I co-manage managed to achieve their target. So their initial target, which was really surprising in a good way, luckily. So same with Save the Children, we stopped almost all our face-to-face activities, even in Australia, for example, where I think COVID was having a less impact. We also stopped, and we haven't restarted face-to-face. I think only Hong Kong is the only market that we don't really stop face-to-face through the pandemic. We focus mainly on retention. So I mean, everybody knows, I think retention is super important, but this pandemic really highlight how important it was. And we really try to switch into a lot of telemarketing as well, not only for acquisition lead gens, but also just for thank you call, just make sure that we stay connected with our donor base. And also that we've tried a lot of innovation stuff. For example, we decided to go for live stream fundraising globally. So we created a campaign globally as WWF, led by WWF Australia. So it has been quite successful. Like we raised more than 100,000 US dollar from 5 countries from live streamers. So the pandemic also brought something new, like more offices are daring to do more innovation. And it didn't take like 3 years to do something new or test something new. So that's also a positive bit. So I'm trying to be a bit more positive in my messages here, that the pandemic also brought something good. And also with legacy, for example, well, again, Ligia can tell you more, but what we did was that we called a lot of our legacy pledgers, like the whole of, I think in the UK, we asked even non-legacy fundraisers to help us calling the pledgers, just checking in, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? You know, because they were really in the isolations basically, and it has been appreciated so much by our pledgers. Even a 5 minutes, 10 minutes call, just checking in, really appreciated by them. So it's been copied as well by several other offices. We decided to also to launch our TV ad for legacy. Well, some countries using it only for online, but we were afraid during the pandemic to launch this because, you know, the message can be quite sensitive. But we decided to just go forward with it because the video was very positive, and we adapted the video now in 7 different countries, and it has been very positive received. We haven't received any negative feedback. So the brand team was really worried when we decided to go, but actually nothing to worry about. The message was positive. I know it's legacy, but it's not about that at all. And our donor database really like it. So message for you guys as well. Just do it sensitively, and then it should be fine, even with legacy message. What else can I try? Oh, a lot of times when we switch our face-to-face fundraisers to do telemarketing or donor care, it's not the same. We still need to properly train them on telemarketing, because you think that, oh, it's all the same thing, you talk to people, but it's not. So a lot of training goes into it as well, to make sure that they are comfortable, they're confident enough, and also to keep them motivating, because that's one of the most important things, to keep them going is very important. So what else that I can tell you? Yeah, and so far we just closed our financial year, and our number looks really good. We achieved our target as well for FY20. So finger crossed, going forward, as Laura already said, we need to look into more digital, and we will open face-to-face again, but then now we realize that, for example, telemarketing will help a lot as well in terms of the quality of our donors. So more or less, I think that's from me.
Wow, that was a snapshot whirlwind tour of WWF global. And it's interesting actually, Fine, you know, you work with countries that aren't identified as, you know, key fundraising pinpoints of funding. So I think that's super interesting to delve a bit more into, because they're not areas that you would, you know, naturally kind of migrate to look at. So yeah, really interesting to talk about innovation. So maybe we'll pause that for a minute, put a pin in it, as you say, and come back to it. But I'd like to now go to Charlotte. If you want to have a quick intro about you, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, apologies to everybody that I was so late. Typical situation at the time, trying to juggle too many things, and logging into somebody else's Wi-Fi caused me massive issues. But yeah, let me run through some of the situations and challenges and successes that we've been experiencing at Greenpeace over the last kind of 18 months, I guess. So by way of introduction, I work for Greenpeace US. I'm based in the UK, but I have quite a niche role with Greenpeace, where I am responsible for working just with US-based foundations and major donors to fund our global program. So working with funders who only want to fund Greenpeace across borders, so purely international giving. So that's where all of my sort of comments and insights will come from today. So it's slightly different for my colleagues Fran and Laura. But yeah, foundations and major donors has been an interesting space over the last little while. I think what we found right at the start of the pandemic, so sort of going back to early 2020, as you know, things really started to get real in terms of the huge downturn in fundraising, and you know, in the US we lost our kind of frontline face-to-face fundraising overnight, as did pretty much every other organization, and we saw, you know, a 50–60% drop in our income overnight. And what I was finding from the foundations and major donors that I worked with in the US initially in that stage was a real sense of urgency from them, and a real actual uptick in their giving. And they made it known pretty early on that they were intent on continuing to fund organizations that were already in partnership with, and actually increase their funding to those organizations to try and shore them up through the downturn. So we actually received some of our biggest gifts at that point that we'd ever received from these foundations. And it was pretty much entirely flexible and unrestricted funding, which was another huge change. So project funders, restricted funders, moved from that to just kind of giving, you know, their biggest gifts, and kind of said to us, look, we trust you, use this in whatever way you need to protect the financial health of the organization. So there was a huge increase in the flexibility of those grants. As I say, unrestricted funding was all of a sudden super easy to get hold of, less onerous reporting requirements, and just a general kind of light touch, very hands-off approach from international funders, which was a hugely welcome change, and obviously something that I guess we've kind of been hoping for from the funding community for a long time, and it took the pandemic for them to kind of realize that in order to be a good funding partner to organizations, you know, this is what they needed to do. So we were super happy about that. But it did mean, we were finding that it did mean that it wasn't a great time to be going after new funders or new gifts, new program areas, even with funders that we've been working for a long time. It really felt like funders wanted to really double down and support the organizations and the partners that they've been working with for a long time and knew and trusted. So that was a big shift. And so we actually found that some of the grants and the major donor contributions that we'd been kind of working towards before the pandemic all of a sudden were delayed and kind of put off in favour of increasing funding for existing partners. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how this new era of like flexible grant making and availability of unrestricted funds continues in the long term. I think we're all kind of watching this space to see if any of that sticks. We've seen, you know, some signs of hope, I guess, and foundation partners in particular are continuing to realize, you know, what it takes for them to be a sort of equitable funding partner. So that's really good. Some of the trends that we're now starting to see in terms of international giving from US funders actually is a real shift to domestic funding, actually. So it sort of feels like the international funding space has slowed a little bit in terms of US foundations particularly, while they, as I say, really double down on their domestic giving, in particular with a focus on social justice and a kind of just recovery from COVID, basically. So we all know that the pandemic has exposed huge imbalances in equity around the world, and you know, huge systemic kind of challenges that we have in the world. And so it definitely feels like the international funding community have kind of done a 180 and shifted all of their attention to finding their place in tackling that crisis, which is you know, fantastic. And again, it's kind of almost like the pandemic has kind of brought something into being that we've been hoping for a long time, and now, you know, everyone's realizing that it's these you know, we have to tackle inequality globally, and so this is you know, a big shift. And so I think international giving out of the US, while it's not decreasing by any means, what we are seeing is that the foundations, particularly that are, for example, dipping into their endowments to release new funding capital, are doing that to fund domestically. So there isn't any kind of new money, I guess, at the moment going into international. And so we're sort of trying to navigate that and see what longer term impacts that's going to have. I'm going to mention Mackenzie Scott because I feel like this is the one international donor that everyone's kind of intrigued about at the moment and following very, very closely, because I think her giving patterns are quite indicative of some of the trends. You know, she, in her last grant round in December, she gave zero to international causes or cross-border issues. She focused whatever it was, another 3 or 4 billion purely on grassroots, community-led, BIPOC-led organizations in the US that were tackling inequality and systems change. So I think a lot of us were a little bit surprised by that, I guess. She had got off to quite a strong start in terms of her international giving. And then, you know, that ground to a halt in the last grant round. She's now signaled that in her next round of giving, she will return to some of the international themes that that she'd previously signaled. So it's looking like that's going to be a geographical focus on Africa and India, and then looking at children's health and education and female empowerment across those regions. So that's a welcome sign, and I do feel like she's starting to become a bit of a sort of beacon of, you know, she's becoming a funder that I think a lot of other individual and foundation funders will follow. She's setting trends, so that's quite an interesting space to watch. And I think, yeah, my last kind of reflection or maybe point for the future for us all is that collaboration between organizations has become even more important than it ever was. We all know that foundation partners major donors want to see organisations collaborating. They want big bang for their buck. They want to sort of have the biggest impact that they can. And really this is becoming pretty crucial now. And certainly we're at Greenpeace, we're kind of trying to work out how to sort of reposition ourselves in that space and you know, how to tick that kind of collaboration box, if you like. Particularly, I think, because there is this sort of groundswell of support for community-led organisations. So us kind of bigger, you know, more INGOs or big national organisations have to rethink how we're gonna how we are going to you know, fit the funders' new focus. So I think that's a challenge for us all. And again, I think it's a good challenge that they're posing us, because there absolutely needs to be more collaboration. And I think, you know, to tackle these big global crises that we're in, the funding community and the NGO and charity community need to employ systems thinking rather than kind of operating in our silos or operating as individual organisations. You know, that's just not going to cut it in terms of the impact that we all want to have, and then the what the funders are looking to us to do now. So I think that's all from me now, and super happy to hear your questions. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you, Charlotte. I think that's super interesting, because a lot of people on this call are from smaller organisations, and I think it's kind of a tradition for the smaller organisations to look at the big ones like they're kind of untouchable almost. So it's really interesting to kind of pull back the curtain, if you like, and look behind and see that really, whether you're Greenpeace or whether you're a tiny organisation, you kind of have similar sort of issues and struggles. So it's really interesting, and it's also good to hear that, you know, the big organisations are looking to collaborate and are looking for the small organisations for that foundation funding too. So I think that really kind of helps to open doors on both sides. You know, that the community, I think you're right in that sorry, I'm talking, but I think that the pandemic has opened lots of different doors actually. So out of this terrible situation has really come some good for a lot of organisations, in that it's making people having to rethink about their own organisations and to kind of, you know, like Juan said as well, to innovate and to try different things and to really be a bit brave about it. I think it's really opened that door. I'm going to stop talking, it's not about me. So I've had some questions in, so thank you guys for that. Barbara, I'd like to go to you next with your question, please.
Hi, my question's to you, Laura. I'm wondering, in terms of the close tie between COVID and the impact that it actually has on the programs that save the children, and I was wondering if there was any opportunity that, like, in terms of, you know, COVID hit everyone. Did this also kind of interweave into your messaging or your fundraising in terms of greater awareness in the public about, you know, save the children? And I guess education and health are the objectives that are of most interest to me. So I was wondering if you could comment on that. And thank you, everyone. This has been very useful. Thank you very much for providing some insight.
Thanks, Barbara. Nice to meet you. I mean, in short, yes, absolutely. I mean, we tailored a lot of our messaging, and just to give you a bit of an example, so our team in Spain have a lot of digital campaigns already on things like child marriage and more national campaigns on domestic violence. And so actually when COVID hit, it was just around tailoring those messages for those campaigns to really sort of represent what COVID meant as a result on those topics. And, you know, it just allowed us to really sort of drive the areas that we work on, because there was this unifying thing of COVID that everyone was experiencing, but to really talk about what it meant for the, you know, for the children that we support. And maybe it's on a slightly different vein, but we did, it launched in the US. We had a huge social media campaign on Instagram called Save with Stories, where we got a number of celebrities and people to read stories on Instagram because everybody was at home and people were struggling with childcare and those issues of juggling work and having homeschooling and things like that. It was really about connecting people and getting people to sort of read stories that their children could watch, to sort of find this common connection that then meant we could talk about the work that we did as well. And that was huge in the US, and the UK and Korea adopted it as well. So it was, again, it's just all about relevancy for us. So using those platforms to tailor the messaging to really talk about those issues we work on, like education and health. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it's very useful, actually, because I think there's a level to which it sounds obvious, but what it means to the scholars that we support, because I think is a narrative that echoes, you know, and will be very effective for us. But having not talked to you, I wouldn't have thought of it, you know, so thank you. Yeah.
Great. Does that answer your question, Barbara? Cool. Okay, brilliant. We have another question to all of the panelists, and maybe I'll go to one first. So, Matt, are you there? There you go.
I am indeed. Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Helen. Hi, everybody. Really great to meet you all, to be here. And thanks for the brilliant intro to your organisations. My name is Matt Patton. I'm British but based out of the Netherlands, also in Amsterdam, and I'm Global Relations Director for Catalyst 2030. We're a field building organisation for social entrepreneurship. And my question, which I did put into the chat already, so hopefully maybe you've had a quick chance to think about it, I'm going to move us right away from COVID. I'd be really interested, particularly with the three panelists that we've got here. I know a little bit about all of your organisations, and I know that you do have nodes globally. So my question is really about that. How do you ensure that there's a central coordination to mitigate risk of multiple approaches to funders across those nodes? And also, as a sort of secondary part to that, could you share any practical experience of ways that you can ensure that we can ensure that there's consistency in those approaches globally to ensure brand, mission, vision, and values are presented with coherence, whilst maintaining, and this is where the tension comes, a decentralized operation to allow those localized strategies to flourish? It'd be really useful to get your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Who wants to take that first one, or Charlotte?
I can go really quickly, actually. So hi, Matt. To be honest, your first part of the questions about the funders, I'm not working in a major donor team, so I don't know exactly, but I know that we have a guidelines on how to tackle global donors, because as you know, nowadays major donors are actually a global citizen. They can, they are Swiss, but they have properties around the globe. I know that we have that, but I don't know how exactly they manage it. So probably Charlotte will be able to answer that better. So on the second part of your questions, WWF is a confederation, so we are really decentralized, very less centralized than others, but we do have guidelines. So for example, last year during the pandemic, we decided to launch a comms campaign called One Planet, One Health, One Planet. But the fundraising was really minimum because we just want to wait and see at that moment. But then I have to create a guidelines on how to communicate the fundraising bit if local office wants to use it. So that's how we try to, but the message usually we leave it to the local office depending on their situation. So we have a guideline and we have brand template as well that we produce for the local office to use, but again, they can adapt it wherever they want. And what I want to say is that, we also had an Australian bushfire emergency campaign last year, right before the pandemic. And it was one of very few global campaigns, global fundraising campaigns that we did as a network. And it was massive. I was the lead for the fundraising emergency campaign for Australia, and it was the first time that we experienced as WWF network to come together. But the key was that Australia, as the owner of the campaign, was able to really produce stories and produce a basic template assets for everybody to use easily, and just to communicate really like we talk every day. So then it's out every day very quickly. So before the media got the story, we already push it to our database. So it's really needs to be really quick movement basically, and very agile. I think Laura already said this as well. But yeah, we are quite decentralized charity. So it's a bit different animal, I guess.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, the Bushfire campaign was enormous, right? I mean, I don't remember offhand, but like millions was raised for that, right?
Yeah, it was
No?
it was huge. It was 100+ millions in the end from, and mainly single gift as well, single gift donors, and even countries like Colombia, for example, managed to raise money on the topic because it's a global emergency. But then we also have guidelines on how to define global emergency, because it can be like an oil spill in Madagascar, but it's not picked up by the media, for example. So then it's become a regional emergency and it's not a global emergency. So we have a guideline as well on how to decide that, and basically the decision-making process.
I guess that's a whole other thing, actually. It's like what stories get picked up by the media and what gets run with. So maybe we need to have another kind of session on how to get your story to the media, because I think that'd be really interesting. Anyway, moving on. So Charlotte, what was your take on that?
Yeah, a great two-part question. I think they're really vital things to consider. So at Greenpeace, in answer to the first part of the question, at Greenpeace we have a pretty clear policy and protocol in place globally that that mitigates the risk of what you're talking about in terms of multiple approaches to funders, or inconsistency of approach, or any kind of unjoined up activities. So we, the basic rule is that the office in the country, so we have like, I don't know, 28 or something offices around the world, either in countries or covering regions. And so the rule is that wherever the funder is based, so whether that's, and again, I'm talking about foundations and major donors, but wherever the foundation is, based, headquartered, and wherever the major donor is living, that office manages that relationship, basically. So it's, pretty straightforward. And anybody else in the kind of global Greenpeace network from other offices who are interested in making an approach to that funder has to get the permission of the office. I think we call it the host office. So yeah, whichever Greenpeace office is managing that relationship. And so, it's purely done on geography. And that works pretty well, actually. And it's taken us a long time to sort of socialize that policy, I guess. And over my 8 or so years at Greenpeace, it's definitely getting better. There are less instances where, in fact, yeah, hardly any now, where officers are kind of bypassing the host office. So that's a good policy, and it's I guess kind of replicable in any decentralized organization. Yeah, to talk to your sort of second point about yeah, decentralization, and I mean, we're completely decentralized. We went through that process a long time ago, 7 or 8 years ago, if not longer. So all decision making pretty much, and all program planning and delivery happens at the regional and country level. So, but in terms of fundraising, one of the things that we all value and push forward as much as we can is actually the value of us being we've kind of coined it glocal, so local, so it's global and local. So we're able to implement projects or campaigns on the ground in the local context that are entirely kind of relevant to local context. taking into account, you know, Indigenous rights and being community-led where possible. But as an organisation, we have a global reach, so that's actually something that we promote particularly in our foundations and major gift fundraising, is that's a benefit of an organisation like Greenpeace or any other type of kind of global decentralised organisation. So we have a global voice, but we deliver locally, and that seems to hit the right note with a lot of international funders. So yeah, I don't know if that answers part of your question.
Yeah, no, totally. Hey, Laura, I'm just conscious of time. We've got 10 minutes left and one more question. So Laura, have you got any kind of insight or input that you want to add to this one?
Just super quick. I think we're very similar, and Matt, you outlined that tension perfectly. Maybe just a couple of practical things from my perspective to share in terms of how do we manage that. I think it's like looking at the power that we've got collectively and where can we add value so that we're not all reinventing the wheel and we've got those shared challenges. So a lot of what the team that I work in does is looking at, I mean, we've got global brand guidelines and global protocols and lots of things as well, but it's about developing frameworks that can be adapted. So for example, at the moment, we've got a global legacy framework being developed, but we can't have a global proposition because of what it means in each country is slightly different. But we're almost like creating the template that people can then insert the relevant pieces to have ownership, so they don't have to start from scratch, but they can adapt it to their markets as well. So lots of approaches like that with our different channels.
Super, thanks everyone.
I think that's important, isn't it? Because you can't blueprint. I mean, as a UK person coming from the UK to the Netherlands, I thought, yes, you know, everything I learned in the UK, I can adapt and I can use in Europe, and it wasn't really the case. So I think it's really, from my own personal experience, I think it's really important to say you can't just pick something up in one place and put it somewhere else, because there are cultural and sensitivities and lots of different differences. So that's really important. So again, conscious of the time, we've got 10 minutes left, and one question that came in was about cancelling events, and we touched on it at the beginning in the introduction. One of the participants, they had a lot of events for their organisation, but obviously had to cancel them, and face-to-face has to go online and digitally. So it'd be really interesting to hear from everybody how you kept the donors engaged virtually, and how you got over kind of donor fatigue, and how you got over the kind of you know, everybody moving online, and how you kept that engagement. So who wants to take that first one? She's also asked about digital databases and how you got over the GDPR, but I don't know if we'll have time to go into that. But I think it's quite relevant actually, because what we're doing right now is to see how we keep people motivated to stay engaged online.
Laura, you can go first because I already answered the previous one.
Yeah,
so.
you did. Laura?
Sure. Just a quick response to this one. So we don't do that much event fundraising at Save the Children. However, we did last year have a number of global webinars that were mainly targeted for higher value donors. Some members did invite sort of a wider mix of supporters, and these were really focused on having people from our program staff, our humanitarian teams, to really sort of share what Save the Children was doing you know, during the pandemic, and how it's impacting our work. So hearing directly from the field and connecting donors directly with the chance to sort of talk to our program staff about what we were doing. And we had a number of those throughout last year, and they were really successful. I mean, what I will say is, you know, you never get as many people turn up as sign up, and you know, it is sort of work to get that engagement. But even just the notion of inviting people in other organizations I've worked in has a positive impact. And so whilst you might not necessarily get a huge volume turn up, it can still really help with the ongoing engagement, just to sort of have that invitation that goes out. And actually for the high net worth individuals that did predominantly turn up at these global webinars, it had a really powerful impact, and was kind of built into the engagement strategy with my philanthropy colleagues, you know, as part of that ongoing relationship building. And we will continue to do those because they make it really accessible particularly for some of the larger geographical countries where people couldn't visit in person anyway to attend events. It just means that it's accessible for a wider group of people.
Agreed. We found the same actually with things like Ifab and the events that Chapel in York have been holding throughout the year. It's kind of opened it up to people based in the African continent and also South America, but also connecting with people that you wouldn't normally connect with in Singapore and Hong Kong. And it's been again, it's kind of something good that's come out of the pandemic is people are becoming a lot more kind of accessible globally. So I think that's good. Charlotte, anything to add?
Yeah, I checked in with my colleague. I'm not involved in our kind of individual outreach, which is where the majority of the events lie, but I checked in with my colleague. So I'm just going to tell you what he said because he had some good tips. So apparently we kind of predicted, I guess, that virtual events would be a challenge. So we purposely sort of limited the numbers of those that we were doing. But what we did do with some success with a kind of, as my other colleagues have said, some smaller ones. We did a kind of phone-in, I guess, a webinar with our executive director talking about our program. But we sort of kept it very program focused. It was small with about 15 people. And yeah, just listening to our executive director talk about our campaign plans. But really our major gifts team, who normally would rely very heavily on events, they've been really only doing kind of one-to-one outreach with their portfolio of donors in lieu of being able to see them in person. And we think that will continue for a long while. And it's just, it's the best way to sort of keep them engaged at the moment, trying to send them kind of program updates or just checking in to see how they are. I think, what we've found as a kind of general comment, what we've found throughout this whole time has been just a really solid reminder of the importance of relationships and fundraising, which I don't need to tell anybody here about. We all kind of know this, but we've seen it in kind of stark practice over the last 18 months. The donors that we invest the most in terms of the relationships have been the ones that have kind of continued to give and who want to continue to support us. So yeah, just my major donor colleagues kind of tell me that they're just spending a lot of time kind of doing regular check-ins with people, and back to the point at the beginning about kind of treating our funders like human beings, and now is the most important time for us to remember to do that. And so just asking how they are and how they're coping, and so doing a lot of that instead of the traditional events that we would normally rely on.
Would you say that, I mean, just on kind of talking to your colleagues or your own experience, would you say that people that have been, especially major donors that have been kind of unreachable prior to COVID, have become more attainable, as in they're more used to being contacted online, and you don't have to go through the gatekeepers, you don't actually have to travel physically to get to that person, that you can just kind of call them up. Do you think that's kind of opened those doors a bit during COVID?
I think we did see that at the beginning with the major donors. Yeah, we were sort of buoyed up because all of a sudden it felt easier, as you say, to reach these people because everything was online and people were kind of all communication was WhatsApp and email and online platforms. So it spiked, but now we're seeing that tail off and the fatigue is setting in, and people are fed up with constantly being on their kind of phones and responding to messages. So we're seeing a kind of drop off of accessibility to those people now. So so there have been some really interesting curves as the human experience of the pandemic has followed that sort of pattern that we're all following, as have our funders, obviously, because they're human beings. So we've just had to go with that.
Yeah, I think as with anything, you have to go with the trend, right? You have to go with what's happening. So I think, I think that it's another kind of cause for innovation. It's like, well, this is happening, so how do we then innovate to the next level of it? So again, really conscious of the time, I'm going to have to wrap up. I want to thank Juan and Charlotte and Laura again for your time and for talking to us. I hope everybody agrees. It's been really interesting and really insightful, really good conversation. So thank you for them taking part. Thank you for the questions and for everybody else that's also taken part. We're going to be sending out a questionnaire next week. We'd really, really appreciate it if you could just take 5 minutes. It's really short. 5 minutes to complete the questionnaire and feedback to us on your thoughts, good, bad, how we can improve, what you liked, what you didn't. That'd be great. We have, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is the series of roundtables. So we're having a break for the summer. And we're back in September, so I'm sure that you'll get an update from us for the September roundtables. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And also we're doing Ifab again in November, which is a 3-day event talking about, and amongst other things like major donors and also focusing on international fundraising. So please keep an eye for that. So thank you once again for everybody taking part. Have a lovely summer. I hope the sun shines wherever you are. And hopefully we'll speak to you in September. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Nice to see you, Gareth.
You. Thank you.
Take care. Have a good summer.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Well, we small ones are starting to have the problems that the big ones have. And the thing is, we are small, but we've got to think big. And if we think big, we're going to end up with the same issues. So it's best to learn about them sooner than later.
Yeah, but it's also interesting. Yeah, and it's also interesting to know that the big ones are actually probably having the same issues that you guys have as well. So, yeah.
Well, we've got to keep thinking big. Thank you, Helen.
No problem. Take care. Have a good summer.
And you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.